Hey, it's Adam Adams, and I'm grateful that you're here at our YouTube channel. I hope that you will take a time to like, comment, and subscribe below. Like, comment, subscribe below. That'd be great, and that would help us out a lot. Today, this video is a partner of mine. His name is Brad Lowery. He is an Uber genius, and Uber geniuses love numbers. And what he's going to do is break it down into the 101 version so that you and I can understand how we best start to get into multifamily investing. How do you underwrite these properties? What do you look for? There is some gems that you're going to really enjoy, and this is basically the 101 version. So it's good for any of us, depending on whatever level we are. There is some really good gems that we're going to pull out of this. So without further ado, here is Brad Lowery.
We're going to be talking about underwriting. My name is Brad Lowery, and I'm with BlueSpruce Holdings. And here's our team.
Push down.
Down. Very good. Okay. So first question for everyone is, what is underwriting? Anybody answer that question?
Basically, like running preliminary numbers to see if it makes sense or not.
Yeah, so definitely running the numbers. It's doing an analysis, but I think most importantly, you're evaluating the risk of a deal. That sometimes gets left out. A lot of times people just are solving for returns, which you of course want to know, but you want to know how likely you are to achieve those returns. So a lot of you, it sounds like, want to get into multifamily. That's great. You'll definitely need to know how to underwrite. But for those of you who are just passive, it's also important that you know what to look for and know what questions to ask. All right, so sorry to do this to you, but I have a quick quiz. Make sure everyone's paying attention. So let's say we have an 83-unit property, and each unit is renting for $1,000 a month. Right? So keep the numbers simple. That would give you $1 million in income in year one. Now, whether it's a pro forma from a broker or a pro forma I see in a deal packet that I'm looking at, I'll often see something like this, where this is year one and year two. And you can see they jump up. So my question is, how did they get from here to there? Does anybody know?
Standard.
Rent increase.
So, rent increase. This is a 2% growth in income, right? Mm-hmm. So good. So you're going to raise your rents 2%. All right. What formula would I use to raise the rents 2% by the end of the year? Does anybody know this? It's okay if you don't.
Plus 2%.
I'll ask my underwriter.
Multiply by 1.02.
This is the formula you would use. So it's going to be your rent, which is $1,000 a month, times 1 plus the percent that you're raising it, raised to the 1/12 power. All right, let's see what that looks like. So if we break this out over a 12-month period, which is, let's see here. Adjust this a little bit. All right. So this would be your typical year. So we're starting out at basically day one, month 0. We're at $1,000. We're going to increase uniformly to month 12. At month 12, we've achieved 2% rent growth. If you add all this up, this is what you get right here. And as you can see, that is not that number. So this is a pet peeve of mine. When I see this, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. The way that you would actually achieve this number is by starting day one and increasing all of your rent by 2%. Right? So now you get that total you're after. What's the problem with doing it this way? Anybody tell me?
Max X
property and raise everybody's rent 2% on day one?
No.
No, absolutely not. So, this right here, if they said we're going to increase our total income by 2%, then maybe I can get behind it. But if they say we're going to raise 2% or raise our rents 2%, and it's going to look like this, well, no, it's not. So what often happens is people will try and justify it. They'll say, all right, I have a CoStar report, and they're projecting 3% rent growth in year one. Okay, that's fine. But if they take this number and multiply it by 3%, that's not accurate. You actually would have to raise the rents much more than 3% each month to achieve that. So, like I said, that's a big pet peeve of mine. And it's just a good thing to know. You want to question everything you see. That's the most important, is that you verify all these numbers. You don't just take it at face value. So, with that said, the numbers, do they really matter? Obviously, I'm sure most of you are familiar with all of these right here. These are quantifiable numbers, right? They're finite. They are important, but they're small pieces to the puzzle. This is what you really want to see. You want to see the big picture. And this touches back on risk. Say, what is the overall return and how likely am I to achieve it? And that is a qualitative assessment, right? There's no metric that can give you that answer. That is something you'll have to establish for yourself. What is your criteria? Or if you're looking for investors, you need to know what they're comfortable with. I've seen plenty of deals, or I have a lot of people come to me with deals and they say, hey, I've got a 10 cap in Denver, do you want to look at it? And I say, well, no, not really. Can you tell me more? Because that means nothing to me. Don't get stuck on any of these. I've seen debt coverage ratios that are negative. The cash flow is negative. And they can be great deals. So again, just keep that in mind that this is a small part of the puzzle. Few important things to keep in mind. Brokers lie. So I know that's probably a shock, but it is true. There are all kinds of brokers out there. Some are sleazy, some are just dumb, and then you get some that are pretty good. But you need to be wary of that and make sure you do your due diligence. Another thing to look out for is economic vacancies. This is something that can be difficult to determine up front. You know, you could have a property where it's looks stabilized. You have 95% occupancy, looks good, but you have a lot of economic vacancy. And that speaks to a bigger underlying issue, which often refers back to the tenant class. So with poor tenant class, you're going to get higher economic vacancies, and they're also going to be rougher on the property, so that's going to increase your turnover costs. Another thing to keep in mind up front is capital expenditures. This is something that can easily be overlooked, and it has a huge impact on your property. Again, most importantly, verify everything. I can't stress that enough. Does anybody know what this number is? Right. Adam?
Oh no, that's for a ticket.
Oh, for a ticket.
You have one in your pocket.
Oh, yeah. So, 261 is the number of deals that I have passed on in the last 6 months. If I took the broker's pro forma at face value, I would have bought every single one of those.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, we got through that. Now I want to kind of go through the chronology of what it looks like when I'm underwriting a deal. So initially, these are the things that are required for me to get I need to have all of this information. And this is actually an email that I send out to people who give me deals that don't have all this. And obviously you need to know how many units there are. You need to know the purchase or whisper price. So if it's an off-market deal, they might not have a purchase price, but you need to get an idea of what they're expecting it to trade for. Otherwise, you can't really tell if it's even worth your time. Same thing with the offering memorandum. If it's off-market, give me a story behind the asset.
Good question.
Yeah.
What is whisper price?
Whisper price is what the seller wants for it, what they would be willing to take, or what the broker expects it to trade for. A lot of times, it'll be unlisted so they can try and get a bidding war going or something of that nature. So you want to get to the bottom of that up front. For T12, I prefer an accrual-based T12 instead of a cash-based one. Like it to have the gross potential rent, loss to lease, gross scheduled rent, vacancy, concessions, and other income, and as well as all this stuff here. If you don't have all that, you're going to need to get it, so you might as well get it up front. Current rent roll, very important. And then a good list of comps. This is obviously something you can do on your own, but it just saves a lot of time if they provide that up front. And then as far as value add goes, this goes back to the OM and the story they're trying to tell. You want to know what is a verifiable value add play that you can do on this property. All right. So once I have all that, the first thing I want to do is just get a consensus of the area. Now, this can be a non-starter, so it'll save you a lot of time if you do this up front. You've all heard the phrase location, location, location. Have a little bit of a spin on it here. So this part would be the overall market or the city. So in this case, Oklahoma City. Now that's a market that we at BlueSpruce are interested in. And this second one has to do with what area of the city, what quadrant is it in. So we're interested in this northwest corridor. You can see the key over here. This is list A properties, B properties in yellow, and then green is the C property. So you can see there's a lot of green here ensconced in some A and B areas.
Where did you get this map?
This is from RE Indicator. It's a software. I think it costs like $1,000 a year. I wouldn't say it's worth it, but we get it for free, so it's one thing I look at, but it's not the final say by any means. And then the last one would be just the neighborhood it's in. So, within this northwest corridor, you see this here is a D area, and that's not good. You don't want to be there. But if you're in the C areas with some B or A's around it, that's a good position to be in. And the thing to keep in mind about this is we like Oklahoma City for several reasons, right? But those reasons may only apply to this section of the city. In other words, the market as a whole is not doing what that market is. Does that make sense? Okay. So then here are some things to do quick. Look at Google Maps to see, am I looking at a war zone or a nice family neighborhood? These are some useful websites that are free. Niche.com, you can put in the zip code, and then it will give you ratings of that neighborhood. So that's helpful. And then know the population. If I get a deal that's from a town or city I haven't heard of, that's one of the first things I do. You got to know your criteria. For us, it's 50,000 in the city and 100,000 in the MSA. Second thing is just to get yourself familiar with the asset. Read the OM, things to note, year built and year renovated, the occupancy, the tenant base, is it all bills paid? Is it individually metered so the tenants are paying it, or is there a RUBS program? You also want to look at the amenities and the capital expenditures. See, sometimes the OM will tell you, hey, the roofs were just done. That's great. You want to just keep a list of these things handy when you're going through your underwriting. All right. Step 3 is to do an initial evaluation of the broker's pro forma. Again, read the OM and understand his business plan. What does he see this property doing? You can compare the T12 to the rent roll, make sure that those check out, and then compare that to the pro forma. Now, identifying anomalies will come from experience. There's not any one thing I can say to look out for other than the obvious jump. If you're at 85% occupancy on the T12 and rent roll, and the pro forma shows 95% day one, obviously that doesn't make sense. But some of these other anomalies, you really have to just dive in and get experience doing to identify those. From there, I start plugging in some numbers, get an initial evaluation. Like I said before, if I use the broker's numbers every time, I would buy every property. So if you plug in those numbers and the deal doesn't look really good, then you know that it might be time to move on. From there, I would tighten things up. With most templates, they're going to give you a rule of thumb measurement for expenses, and just compare those to the T12 and pro forma. Is there anything that they're showing that's way under budget? So this property here is a good example. Does anybody know where this is?
Texas.
That's cotton right there. This property is in Tunica, Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta. It's about 45 minutes southwest of Memphis. And we were sent this property from one of our contacts. He had passed on it. I believe he couldn't take it on at the time, but he thought it was a really good deal. The property was stabilized, but the broker's pro forma was unrealistic. And the reason for that is all of the comparable properties he had in the OM were from DeSoto County, which I just happen to know is one of the fastest growing counties in the country. It's 15 minutes south of Memphis in Mississippi. However, this property and those properties were not comparable. This one was too far away. So if you didn't know that, then it might look like a great deal. But thankfully, I did because I went to school near here. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to yeah, mushroom and brie burger. Mushroom and brie burger.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's trailing 12 financials. So that gives you income and expenses over the last 12 months. And it should be broken down by month. Profit and loss. They're similar but not the same. You can get a lot of the same information out of them, but they are different. Sorry, we're just taking a break. Okay. Alright. Next thing is take a deeper look at the pro forma income. Run your own comps and do it within 10 years. A lot of times I see properties being compared, like let's say it's a 70s property and they have an 80s or a 90s property that they're comparing it to, and that's just not realistic. You have to try and stay within 10 years. Compare amenities. So one of the things that we do is my partner Manny. He helps me out a lot with pulling comps and doing market research. And what we'll do is create a spreadsheet that lists our subject property and the comps. And then we have an amenities list. We have the utility structure in there. And the goal is to see what the tenant's all-in cost is. So what are they paying overall to live there? So if they're paying $500 a month at the subject property, but that doesn't include expenses, we need to find out what they're paying, utilities. We need to find out what those utility costs are so we can add that all up. So some properties, let's say, are paying $700 a month, but that includes all your utilities. You want to break it down line item by line item to see what their all-in cost is. And for those of you that don't know, RUBS system is Ratio Utility Billing System. So for a property that's not individually metered, this is a way to get around that and bill back your utility cost to the tenant. Now, there are restrictions in place. Certain cities allow you to bill back a certain percentage of that. So it can be capped. That's one thing to find out. And another way to do it is to call the utility company and get an average. Say, for a one bedroom, what's the average that they expect the electric bill to be? And then that gives you a good ballpark of what you can bill back to them. This last part here is rent premium. So if you're going to do a value add play and rehab some units, can the tenant class physically support that? So I understand you want to add some new fixtures, some granite countertops, flooring, and appliances, and you say, all right, that justifies $150 bump in the rent. Not going to really argue with you, but if you have a low tenant class, they may not have that extra $150. They can't physically support that.
Asian chopped salad? Oh, Asian chopped salad or bacon, blue cheese, and chicken? Okay, sorry about that. And the Asian chopped salad. And a half chicken with mashed potatoes and broccoli. Sorry to interrupt, folks.
So if that's the case where your tenant class can't support that, you're looking at a major reposition, which is something people do, but just keep in mind that's a lot of extra work. You've got to essentially upgrade the property and then get all new tenants to support that. For this particular property, this is one we were looking at in Denver, and I include this last piece because it pertains to this particular deal, is we were going to, the broker had suggested we add washer and dryer hookups and rent out washer and dryers to all the tenants. And they had verified this strategy with a couple of units. I think it was 5. And so we looked at that and we said, all right, that seems pretty reasonable. They're achieving these premiums. We could go ahead and do that in the rest of the property. Well, turns out that the plumbing system in this particular building would not support the washer and dryers. And, we were fortunate enough to discover that, but that would have meant replacing the whole plumbing system, and at that point it just would not have been worth it. Next thing is to verify the pro forma expenses. So at this stage, property management is going to be huge. They can be incredibly valuable. They can give you, obviously, their management fees, what they would expect for payroll, but they can also give you an operating budget. And like I said before, you're going to have rule of thumbs with a lot of the templates you use. However, operating expenses differ market to market. So they can give you a really good insight into what that would look like. You want to verify the real estate taxes by calling the tax assessor, find out how they calculate the taxes and what triggers a new assessment. Sometimes they're evaluated on a yearly basis or every 2 years. And then sometimes a sale can trigger a reassessment even in an off year. So again, it's a good thing to know. For insurance, this can take some time, but find out what your coverage would be. For this particular building, this was one of our first deals that we purchased, and we found out our insurance was going to go up by about $10,000, which I believe was like a 40% increase. And fortunately, the deal still worked, but the reason was the prior owner had no insurance, got it fully insured for 100% of the rent, but obviously that increased our expense. So again, don't just use what you see on the T12 or pro forma. Then talk to your lenders. Once you kind of do your initial numbers and have a good idea of what you're looking at, send all of that information to a lender that you work with, and they should be able to give you an idea of what kind of loan you could get. It's also important to note that certain markets are pre-reviewed, which means like with a Fannie or Freddie loan that could typically go up to 80% loan to value. In a pre-review market, it might only go up to 65, and obviously that's a monumental shift. And then for contractors, once you have identified some of the CapEx needs, I would get in contact with some contractors to get a bid for that. And that's another area where property management can really help you out. Sometimes they'll have their own teams in place. Even if they don't, if they're a good property manager, they'll know the good contractors. All right, so at this point, you're getting close. You're going to tighten up your numbers, go back through your spreadsheet, and make sure you can justify each individual line item. Now, I'm going to look at the returns and think, what did I do to get here? It's important to ask yourself, what would happen if I was unable to execute my business plan? So run a couple scenarios. Use the numbers you have for your expenses, and then tweak it. So let's say your value-add strategy didn't quite work out like you wanted it. Am I going to lose a lot of money? That's something you need to feel comfortable with, because sometimes a value-add strategy will make the property look awesome. But if you're unable to execute it, you can lose a lot of money. Then there's more stabilized assets where the value add is really a bonus, right? The property is going to perform well, whether you do anything to it or not. For us, that was our initial strategy. We wanted the lowest amount of risk. So we looked for stabilized properties that were going to perform really well, no matter what we did to them. And then we look for, obviously, value add from there, just to sweeten the deal a little bit. At this point, you should be ready for an LOI. Now, make sure that you never make an offer that you're not comfortable with. There's plenty of properties that we don't even put offers in on because we're too far away. And that's fine. They just don't work for us, but you need to know that. Also, a good thing to do is be transparent with the seller and broker. Let them know how you arrived at that offer. And that can be really helpful down the line. That way, if you get in a position where you need to retrade, you can kind of retrace your steps and let them know, well, look, we discussed this is how we got there. Also, if the seller has unrealistic expectations, and then they see your offer, if that's all they see, then they're probably just going to brush it away. If they see how you arrived there and they read through it, it might change their mindset a little bit. And this is an excerpt from our LOI, and it just shows you what we're basing our offers on. So we do that up front just to let them know. That way, again, if you get in a position where you need to retrade, you can refer back to this. Adam?
Can you define retrade again?
So retrade is just renegotiate. You find out something later down the line that's going to hurt your numbers. You know, that's typical that happens, and at that point you retrade or renegotiate. So, any questions? Yes.
When you're feeling that you're too far apart, is there a percentage number there where you're kind of like saying stay on this project, or you're within 15%, like, well, let's go back to trade?
So what I do is I put a strike price, and a strike price is basically the absolute highest number I'd be willing to pay. And a lot of times that's based on the pro forma that I put forward being executed perfectly. And you know, this just the nature of the business sometimes is you have to come in with a strong offer to get them to pay attention and bite. But again, we include what we're basing our offer on so that we say, all right, we'll come up and meet you on price. So now when we get into due diligence, if we find out some stuff that now we need to go back and lower our number, we're in a position where we can say, look, we were straightforward with you. And so that's how we would do that.
So the 260 some deals that you looked at that you passed on, were those basically because you just, and this is probably all over the place, but was it just because you were just so far away from their price versus what you were willing to offer? Or was it just they just didn't pass the sniff test initially? Or
it's a good question. So it's variable, certainly. There's, the more deals we do, the more you'll hone in on your criteria and what markets you're looking for. And so, I get a lot of deals from all over the country, and some of those will just not ever make it through a full underwrite. And that's kind of what I was hoping to outline in those steps, is that you take some of these initial steps just to know whether it's a non-starter. Obviously, basically any deal, there's a number that will work. But we're looking for specific criteria, and we know what we're looking for. So,
right, makes sense.
Can you put a little bit of a timeline to that from the beginning to the end? Does that whole process take a day, 3 weeks?
If I have every piece of information that I outlined in that first slide, I can know where I want to be at my offer within an hour, at least up front. So again, that initial offer, we tell them what we're basing it on, and then that starts the whole next process of due diligence and just more verification of our assumptions. So. Anybody else?
Well, how long before you put in the actual LOI?
It depends. If it's, there's some deals that are gone in 4 days during our contract. There are some deals that are still on the market 6 to 9 months down the road. After looking at so many deals, I've got a better sense of which ones I need to act on right away and which ones I can take a little bit more time with. So if there's something that comes to me that I really want, that looks really strong, I'll send an LOI that same day, and then start being proactive and making next steps. But that tends to be in markets that I already know really well. So if it's a new market, I would not put in an LOI on the same day. I'd have to already feel really good about where it was. Redone.
So ideally, you're looking for fees surrounded by days and circumstances in general.
Yeah, B and C properties that are surrounded by A and B areas, that's the ideal situation. Because if that's the case, then your value add strategy is much more likely to be achieved. It goes back to that tenant class. If you're in a C area surrounded by C and D tenants, they just can't support that rent increase.
So you just walk away typically from a potential deal if you have a seller with a broker who's just not willing to kind of acquiesce to a good purchase price. Like I feel like sometimes the purchase price is always based on what the property will do in the future. They can't tell you when that future will be.
Right.
And so what typically happens is that, you don't want to give away that value of the purchase price at that time because you're going to have to work for that. So do you just kind of just say, you know what, we just can't do a deal and kind of walk away, even though you may love the neighborhood or the area or the building itself?
Yeah, we definitely try and exhaust all options if we really like a deal and we know the neighborhood, it's somewhere we know we want to be. We'll try and get creative with them and just kind of vet out what their real needs are. For instance, we had a portfolio in Lubbock, Texas, and what we ended up finding out was purchase price was the hard and fast for them. They had investors that required a return, or they were just going to hold on to the property. And I want to say the whole portfolio was around $12 million, and we ended up being off, I think, by $300,000, and it was just enough. That was it. We were where we were, and they were where they were. So we ended up passing on it.
Wasn't that like? Did you say like 10 million? I can't remember, but
It's 12.
12 million, and it was only $300,000 off.
Yeah.
It's just that, like it's...
I have two questions. Speaking of portfolios, you're okay with, is there a disadvantage to a portropolio package where you're looking at 3 different properties, like in the same area? Or do you stay away from those, or is that okay?
No, there's not a downside to it. Just you got to do more due diligence and more time. The advantage is you might be able to get a better price than paying individually. But there's lots of instances where we see portfolios and we only want 2 of the 3 properties, and the third one is essentially worthless to us, and our price isn't going to change much whether we get that one or not. And so some sellers are willing to part ways, and some aren't.
Do you ever think about buying it and then just selling off the property you don't want?
Not really. It's not our strategy. It certainly is some people's, but we tend to stick to what we know. And if we don't see value in it, then we won't feel comfortable with someone else seeing value.
And then my other question is, what do you ever run into sellers that or brokers that they just don't give you the information you need? They don't give you a full T12. They don't give you the full rent roll. So
Yeah.
you don't have. You're just guessing at what the expenses are. What do you do in that situation?
I just don't work with them.
So you don't look at that property at all.
No. Like I said, there's good ones and bad ones. You have to, a lot of times, kind of establish credibility with them. A lot of them are, defensive at first. And so it can take a while to kind of work them over and get them to give you what you need. But, and that was definitely a much bigger problem for us starting out. We're in a position now where if they're wasting our time, I just
or is there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has a lot to do with each market. So in one market, a B property could be a C property, in another market, or an A property. So it's really one thing I'd say is really helpful goes back to property management. Finding someone who is well invested in that area, they will be able to give you the best answer. If you're on the fence, if you're not really sure, I would say more importantly than the building itself is the tenant base, because anybody can look at a building and figure out what they need to do to it to make it nice, but the tenant base is really what you need to vet out more than anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it helps. I've got a question.
Yeah.
Tell me about your rules of thumb. Some of the initial.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb, they tend to change a little bit, obviously, over time, especially with payroll. I've seen that goes up. I think right now we're using 11 to 1,200 a door for payroll. So it's a range for each property. It's a good thing to look at initially and have a good base. But like I said, it is a range. So one thing you'll see vary a lot is the repair cost. The property's been well maintained and it's a little bit newer, even 10, 15 years. Your repair and maintenance can be significantly less. And that goes back to CapEx. If you see they're doing a lot of repair and maintenance, a lot of times it's better just to bite the bullet and get it fixed up to bring that number down. I'm familiar with the template that I use and its rules of thumb. Each one, I think, varies a little bit how it's calculated, but I'd say the best way to kind of vet that out is just seeing a lot of deals and just getting experience to know what looks off, if that makes sense. Anybody else?
All right, give me a round of applause. Oh, you had one.
Regarding the LOI.
Yeah.
So you submit the LOI. Do you have the finance in place already? And how long it will take you to close the deal?
No, we won't have financing in place, most likely. We will have sent it to a lender, or I'll just know what kind of loan I could get on it. I don't know enough to know that, but I would vet it out with the lender first. Just get them to give you a quick size on the deal. And with the LOI, this varies from seller to seller and brokerage to brokerage. So for us, we're putting in so many LOIs that we can't go look at each property beforehand. Some sellers will require that. They will not look at or accept your LOI until you see it. If that's the case, we can't do it. But after you do the LOI, that's when you start making those arrangements. What other question do you? How fast you close? It's a good question. Again, this depends on your contract has hard and fast terms in there, and it varies. We've had an accepted LOI and not gotten under contract for several weeks, and we've had it where we were under contract within 5 days. Again, it kind of depends. Like, you want to go see the property before you get under contract, so we'll have to arrange that with them, and that can dictate that.
But you go ahead and have the financing before you go into contract, right?
We will, since we syndicate, you won't have the financing ready up front, but that'll be dictated in the contract as well. So there'll be a time frame that you have to get that in place, and if you don't, then that gives you an out at that point.
Your thoughts on deals that have non-refundable deposits?
If you're doing a deal that has a non-refundable deposit, you need to be a strong buyer. You need to make sure that you're going to close that deal, and you've had better know it inside and out. We don't do that, but I know a lot of operators do, and I know that it's required. And market to market varies. So some markets it's more standard practice. I think you need to be very experienced at that point and be positive that it's going to be a good deal. You're next.
What does it typically cost once you have a signed LOI to do the due diligence process?
That's varies. It's I'd say 1% of the deal for earnest money is what we typically offer. And you've got your travel expenses and your inspection. And let's see.
Are you into it for an appraisal at that point?
So the lender will do the appraisal. But we don't take one. No.
I always tell people, if you're going to buy a $10 million property, just make sure you're liquid at least $300,000 to put that under contract, because you might go up to 3% of the purchase price.
Just wondering, if you're just putting an LOI in without doing any due diligence, do you ever? I've had trouble in the past getting documents without giving them an LOI. So you always give an LOI without any of the documents. They want. Sometimes they don't want to give you the rent rolls and all that stuff unless it's in the contract. Things like that.
Yeah. We just don't work with them.
Okay.
I need everything up there to make an LOI. So yeah.
Sometimes they don't know.
Yeah, repeat the question.
The question was, do you make an LOI if you don't have those documents like the T12, the financials, the rent roll, that stuff? So my answer was no. I need that information to make a viable offer, and if they're unwilling to give it, then I just move on.
Are you getting pro forma rents from sources like Rentometer and property managers of the one that's not managing that specific property?
Good question. So one thing that's tricky about using like Rentometer or Apartments.com, looking at that, you can look at other comparable properties that are on your list, but they're going to show you the asking rents, not necessarily the effective rents. And sometimes that delta is negligible, and sometimes it's quite significant. So that's where, like you mentioned, property manager is really useful. They can provide a lot of insight there to say, this property is giving you concessions. They're asking 1,000, but by the time it's all said and done, they're paying 900. And then go over your pro forma with them. Go over your business plan. Like we're looking to implement X, Y, and Z, and they'll tell you, well, you're not going to be able to do that in this market or this neighborhood, and that's where they can really be invaluable.
All right, give him a round of applause.